Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. One of my all-time favorite aspects of podcasting and doing the work I do is having the opportunity to meet absolutely epic humans that become instant brothers and sisters in my life. For me, the feeling of picking right up where we left off in a previous lifetime is one of the feelings that informs me I am in alignment and am on the right path to continue creating self-awareness, self-acceptance, and ultimately self-realization as a divine, infinite being having a human experience. Stopping by to share his pure magic with each of you today is a man who, as I stated already, immediately felt like someone I had known my entire life when I met him. Not only this, but it is rare that I meet individuals with complementary energy to my own. As being a fire sign, I move fast and quick and would never expect those who aren't wired this way to understand or care to live into the quote-unquote all gas, no brakes type mentality that I personally adore so much. In this episode, we dive into some absolutely hysterical stories of his, some of his personal theories that have come from psychedelic experiences, and we also take a trip down the rabbit hole ourselves in discussing some far out topics that we hope you enjoy as much as we did speaking about them. So, without further ado, please help me in welcoming my man Brandon Thomas to the show. Brandon Thomas, my man. Dude, so excited to have you here with me today, brother. We were just riffing for like 28 minutes. I know because we started right at 3 before we hit record. And I was like, we got to hit record on this. This is going to be a banger, dude. So thank you for being here with me.
Absolutely. This is outstanding. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, dude. And so, dude, you know, like you're an eclectic guy. You do a lot of amazing stuff. And when it comes to psychedelics, right, like you're someone I truly feel has made life a psychedelic experience with not having to interact with psychedelics very often. And when I connect with people like you, and this is where I start most of the shows, but I'm very curious for you, like, how did you become interested in the topic of psychedelics in your own life, right? And then, of course, how did you eventually like learn to connect with them and actually do connect with them?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me, dude. This is so cool.
Dude, hell yeah.
Secondly, my story is kind of interesting with psychedelics. I knew nothing about the world until I was 18 years old. Like nothing. I was a blind spot. I might as well have lived in The Village, that M. Night Shyamalan movie. And like no fly zone, no, you can't tell them things are going on out here. That's what it felt like. I had no exposure. I didn't even know what weed was. I didn't catch any of the references or the stereotypes or the dogma or anything about it. And so psychedelics were the same exact thing. I saw like tie-dyed shirts and stuff like that, but it was just like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then move on. So it really got in my crosshairs and really in me whenever I moved to Houston from a small town in North Texas. And this was 17 going into 18. I was a senior in high school. I was already 18 years old. I was in a friend's car. This friend had gotten in a motorcycle wreck when he was young, and he got a bunch of money when he turned 18. So he bought a bunch of stuff. Anyway, he was the dude that was always like, hey, let's smoke weed. Hey, let's, connect with cannabis, right? But we were absolutely smoking back then. Smoking the shit out of it, as you say, right? So we were sitting in the car. We'd already gotten the evening out. Mom was already aware or thought that I was somewhere else and safe and everything. So we had permission, all that good stuff. He bought a hotel room, La Quinta, right off of 290. You guys can go check it out. There, across the parking lot here, he goes, all right, we're going to make a run. We're going to do acid tonight. I said, okay. So not knowing anything about this stuff, he just goes, hold out your tongue. And the guy came over to my window, dropped a drop on my tongue, and then he gave me a sweet tart. Those huge sweet tarts that come like 4 to a pack? He had dropped one on that, and he said, all right, here's for later. And I looked at my buddy. He put his in his mouth, so I put mine in my mouth immediately. So 2 hits right away. My first time ever doing it with this. Now, the car ride back, simple, normal, whatever. Now, we get back to the hotel, and things start really moving around. I see this place is pretty interconnected and kinetic. I then end up right as it's starting to go, run out into this field that's right next door. I'm not even sure if it's still there. There's an awning, an over crossing that goes across the highway, but it's not like a people crossing. It's for signs. Like they just put the huge signs up on the highway, not a bridge. And the little catwalks in front of it that shine the lights up on the thing at night so you could see it, right? So I'm tripping my balls off. I climb up on that thing. I climb over it, and I'm sitting on that catwalk, dangling my feet over the highway below, people honking at me and shit. The lights are shining right on me, tripping my balls off. I decide to get down safely. I'm pretty limber, okay? So I decided to get down safely as it really intensified, and I feared for I don't know what. So I get down or whatever, and then my mom calls, and she goes, "Hey, you need to come home immediately. We found out you're full of shit and lying to us, and you need to get home." I was like, "Oh." And then crash. I had this, what they call a bad trip. And it was the first time I'd ever connected. And it was absolutely what you would describe it as. It was horrible. My friend decided to take me home, a different friend, because that friend was obviously incapacitated. He was busy. And so my other friend took me home, and I'm puking out of the side of his car. I'm like crying. I'm shaking. I'm freaking out. Full-blown panic attack. Full-blown do not know what's going on. So I hit this scope within my first experience, a brief moment of invincibility, of course, as well as an interconnectedness with everything. I really felt this kinetic fluid. I'd started to peek behind the curtain of it, and then it just crashed. It felt like I got to the little door in the Wizard of Oz or whatever, and then the floor fell out in front of me before I could get to it, right? So it was this that experience, but then I mean, my curiosity is this much more than my fear. So I went ahead and gave it another go. And after that, I mean, it was very incredible and intense. But I was also experimenting with MDMA at that time, so ecstasy and the tabs, and all of that stuff. And I would combine the two because the acid was heavy. I mean, it's just heavy. I used to take a 10 strip, you know what I mean? So we do 10 hits of acid, and then you need 3 days to recover, right? Just physically, mentally, emotionally. Your dopamine's drained, you're exhausted. And it's like a 16-hour commitment, with no off switch. So you're just in it. So I used to do this a lot with ecstasy. And, the entourage effect made it so profound. Like I got such amazing, uplifting experiences out of this. It was like mushrooms on steroids, but I still hadn't tried mushrooms yet. I didn't do that until after I graduated. And even that, my first time I connected with 14 grams because I didn't know any better. So yeah, that's a fun story. We can go there. We have a lot of one time on psychedelics. I was sitting here trying to think of how many psychedelic stories could I tell, but apparently quite a bit. And so that time though, and my mom's like sitting there screaming at me or whatever, when I get home and her eyeball pops out of her eye, rolls down, steps on it. It was a really crazy experience that night. So that was absolutely nuts. And then, like I said, I experimented further with it. Like I said, the entourage effect seemed to do me well. Through my 20s, experimented quite a bit. And I just had the rule, no needle drugs. And I stuck to that, pun intended, and never participated in that. So other than that, I had a blast. Anything it was, I was there for it.
Dude, that's so wild, man. And, this is actually why I started the show, to hear these wild stories, right? And be able to hopefully educate people on like, hey, we're glad that we survived these things, but at the same time, right? Like there's more information now, there's more education, right? And so hopefully someone doesn't have to make the exact same mistakes, but a lot of the time, people, they just know how hot that stove is themselves instead of being told like the stove's hot. It's like, yeah, well, how hot? And how do I know it's hot, right? And so that's really funny, man. And yeah, LSD is one of those medicines that, I don't think I've ever heard a story where someone goes, yeah, I did acid and it was exactly what I thought it would be. Like it's always like, I took it and some crazy shit happened. It was either way stronger than I thought, or mom called, I had to go home, or any of these kind of things, right? Yeah. And my buddy, I don't know if you've interviewed Dave Robinson yet, but he has a funny story about him, and remind me to introduce you to him because he's got a wild UFO story. Ooh. He just told it in, do you know the Oxoro guy, Zach?
Yeah.
Yep. So he just told it on his show. He's good friends with Dave, but Dave told this story of like, him and his friends riding bikes. And they saw they were all tripping, and they saw one of their moms coming the other way in a car. Oh. And like, she didn't see them, but they were like kind of staring at her as they went by. And one of his friends just smacked a sign, like just dead on. And so like, he's like, if she had looked back, she would have just saw one kid get crumpled by this sign. And so it's just so ridiculous.
And you can imagine being your buddy on the bike, from that buddy's perspective. It's just, where'd my friend go? What the hell was that noise? What the hell's going on? Yeah.
I know. It's like, wow, mushrooms can do that. They can make your friends disappear.
Yes.
It's like, I guess Honey Shrunk the Kids was actually a documentary, not so much a, entertainment movie,
Ooh, that's interesting. Almost like an Alice in Wonderland, when she says, eat me, and then she shrinks or grows, right?
Yeah, 100%, dude. And, it's interesting you brought up the concept of the candy flip because, I've definitely had the candy flips before. And, I've always thought it really levels out the LSD, and And of course, like the come down / the recovery is obviously a little bit more challenging based on that. But at the same time, like I've had some beautifully wild experiences on those two medicines at the same time. Especially, you know, my younger years at music festivals, you know, that was how we made acid tolerable. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like I was telling you before we hit record of like being around 50,000 people on LSD is like a recipe for disaster, right? So you take a little bit of Molly with it and it's bearable, right? And not only is it bearable, but now you can really own it, you know? Like, yeah, it's fun. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yes, sir. It's wild. And I did all of that, dude. It was yes and. It was, do you want yes and some more? I mean, it's always, I've always gone really hard in the paint with it, but I've gotten really profound experiences with it. And so I've been mainly what I would consider a recreational user, but to that point, I find everything deep. And I've really like thought about this. I'll turn a flower deep, like just anything. You give me anything, I'll turn it deep as shit. But what I mean to say is I have reverence for everything all the time anyhow. And especially for nature, especially for how powerful experience itself is. I've had a high reverence for just the fact to be here, alive and breathing, right? And so I've may have relegated it as just like, oh, let's get fucked up and have fun, which absolutely inevitably happened. But there was so many bigger things that I was doing, right? And it's not about the thing. And this is one of the greatest realizations I've come to. Pat Mahan and I've talked much about this. He gave me this. It's never about the thing. The thing is just the iceberg on top of the discovery beneath. And so for me, it was LSD and those kind of medicines may have invited me in under the auspice that we were just going to go have a good time, but it had something to teach me, and I always was there to learn.
Yes, dude, I love that. And this is exactly how I look at everything I do with cannabis, right? Because every once in a while I'll get someone who I can tell on a discovery call is like, oh, I want to learn information about cannabis. I'm like, okay, that's great, but you could learn that anywhere. So why are you about to pay me to learn it, right? You could go on YouTube and learn information. So really, like what I found is that with anything that our heart pulls us into, right, or we feel like a calling or even a craving to do, right? Like there's something where, you know, there's always an underlying thing, right? Like there's not, you know, it's almost like how how do I put this? It's almost like the thing itself is never the end goal, right? Like we don't connect with cannabis just to sit there and connect with cannabis, right? Like we do it because we're looking for something, whether it be creativity, whether it be freedom, whether it be relaxation, right? There's something, right? There's something that we could potentially learn. And the more that we can be aware that, again, like it's not the thing itself, but it's what comes forth as a result. And I talk about this with cannabis all the time. And I say the main difference in a conscious relationship with cannabis is that we're aware of this. We're saying, okay, yes, we're choosing to connect with this plant or choosing to go to this class or choosing to interact with this person. But really what I'm doing is following a cue from my heart to explore who and what I truly am and what my soul is guiding me in becoming and who it's guiding me in becoming. And that is like really what I'm interested in. You know, like when I say yes to a music festival, it's not to go see the same acts I could see in Boston, right? It's to go have an experience. Yeah. And within that experience, it's shrouded in mystery. And that's what I love the most. And that's why I've always been so into psychedelics, because in a world where, you know, for a very long time, and I think it is changing now, it was just like keep up with the Joneses, business as usual, school for 12 years, and you go to another 12 years or another 4 years. You know, it's like everything was kind of mapped out. And I'm like, well, that's boring as fuck. Like I want mystery. I don't want to know what's going to happen, you know? And so like, I think that's why a lot of us found psychedelics, because it's hard to find individuals that, or areas of society, especially in the Western world, that you can be enthralled in mystery without having some type of like mind altering experience, right? Like that's why organized religion for me never made sense. I go there, I have to be quiet, I have to be reverent, I have to sit in a queue, I have to be quiet. Like none of that excites me whatsoever, you know? Mm-hmm. And those are the situations in which when I go to things where people are like, shh, be quiet, you have to be reverent. I'm like, this is not where I parked my car. Like if you guys are preaching God is definitely not seriousness. Like that is the antithesis of what God is. And whenever I've had like 5-MeO experiences, which is the closest I feel I've ever gotten to like dying and going back to source, it is ridiculous laughter, like absolutely unbarred, ridiculous laughter. Even in psilocybin experiences, the peak of it, when I break through, is me just like, oh, I don't even know, and just laughing hysterically. Yeah. And when you talk to, or when you see the people that are quote unquote closest to God in reality, right? Like the Dalai Lama or like a Ram Dass or Bob Marley, were they the epitome of seriousness? No, right? And so for me, that less serious vibe has been a compass for me. Like when I meet people like yourself, right, who laugh a lot, who are smiling, that to me is joy. And joy comes as a direct result of our innate being coming from our governing force of love that is the entire universe, God, source, whatever you want to call it. And so, yeah, I'm so glad you bring that up. And I think that's why a lot of us just get pulled to psychedelics, because that's where we see that, like, oh, well, with this, we can have a lot of fun. Now, we don't need those things to have fun, but at the same time, they can be that great pattern interrupt when we find ourselves in too serious of a life, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think of it as collaboration. And so, like I spoke of the entourage effect, I was very aware of involving different components to create a desired result, like mixing paint colors together, right? Things like that. And so with cannabis, I would say, hey, cannabis, I can write music. And when I was a touring musician for 12 years. That's the guitar that went to China with me. But we did this, but I would sit there and say, okay, yeah, I write great music, but what does it do whenever I make it a duet with cannabis? Like, what does that look like? What is the entourage effect of that interaction and component yield? And with this understanding, I figured out that that's where it's a relationship and not a dependency. Now, I could still, again, write music just fine without it, but I found I appreciated subtle nuances more. And this is where I started sanding the tops of my guitars. I would get home with a brand new guitar like that. It was a $900 guitar or something like that. That's in $2,006, people. And for a starving musician. And it had this lacquer over the top of it, right? A clear coat. I shook my orbital sander and sanded the whole thing off and got to that real wood underneath, because when I was connecting, I hear differently. I perceive sound differently. It's a haptic thing. I can feel it through the vibrations in the guitar. I played acoustic, and you can feel it differently, but also there's subtle intonations that are denoted by the lacquer. I think, therefore it is, right? And I could just hear it open up. And I noticed this when I played one without and one with. And so I found the style and play that I liked, but I'd rip that top right off because I could hear it, right? But it's been a conjunctive process with me in a lot of things. And, I quit drinking 2 years ago. That was a component. That was sort of an ancestor thing. That was an interesting deal. Cannabis was there, and it wasn't even hard. I just stopped drinking and keep moving forward. So with me, it's been this, like you said, it's this deep relationship. It's this deep connection, but it also is an invitation to collaborate. It's a co-collective creative in that sense for me.
Definitely. Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. I 100% agree. And I think one of the challenges that I know I see in a lot of my clients, and I also had in my life, was shame and guilt around really enjoying cannabis, like specifically cannabis. Like with other psychedelics, they were never like a all the time thing for me, because I didn't get into any other psychedelic until I was 23, right? So I had gone through like, my club phase and all these things, and I had just drank, right? Because I was never a drinker. I'd have like 2 or 3 beers and I'd just be like, oh, I'm done. I can't fit any more liquid in my stomach. I lucked out. Like, I witnessed how many people have been struggling with alcohol, especially in my family as well. And I'm just so grateful to my body for just always giving me headaches when I drank and just like making me feel bloated and gross. So for me, it was always like, let me have a couple of drinks and let me just interact with cannabis. And, I think that when we look at a lot of different change makers in the world, but a lot of them have one thing in common, which is they connected with these psychedelics, right? And I think that one of the things that turns me off about a lot of different institutions, let's just say, and I won't mention any names, but what turns me off is this whole like, why would you need plant medicine? You're not a plant. I'm like, that literally makes no fucking sense. Like,
shit.
Should I not eat plants because I'm not a plant? Should I not eat meat because I'm not an animal?
You breathe what they fart. What are you talking about?
I know, like literally, dude. It's like, I don't mind if someone's like, hey, I did those things, and then I found that actually I didn't need them anymore. Cool. I respect that. But when I feel people just like laugh them off as if like, I don't need that, as they're chugging Starbucks coffee. And I'm like, hey, that's got mold in it. What's that doing to you? Oh, that magically doesn't affect your aura, but cannabis does, and it's terrible and all these things. When in reality, psychedelics and humans connecting with psychedelics have been around for much longer than a lot of these people would want to give it credit for, right? Like Chris Bennett, who's a cannabis historian, has a book this thick about the history of cannabis being used in every occult practice, including Christianity, or what is now Christianity, for over 10,000 years, right? There's been a lot of research also he's done that's shown that, like, why do phytocannabinoids from the cannabis plant just magically fit directly into the receptor sites of our endocannabinoid system? Oh, did that just randomly happen? No, that's a co-evolution over a long period of time. And so, like, you know, again, at the end of the day, like, I always say nothing is for everyone, right? Like, everyone that listens to this show knows that I don't advocate for or against anything. I just use discernment to say, hey, hopefully this podcast can allow you to use discernment. But I think that one of the things that troubles a lot of specifically cannabis people, I found, is this shame and guilt, right? Like, they had to keep it secret for a long time. People didn't understand it. Now they're getting into spirituality, and there's this whole, like, you need to be sober all the time, right? When in reality, most of them aren't actually sober. They're just not using a plant medicine like that. They're using caffeine, which is also a plant medicine. So it's just very interesting for me. And that is, like, again, just something for me where I'm like, God would not be that serious. God would not put things here and say, no, you're not supposed to interact with those. Like, you know what that is? That's humans putting human traits into something that is so beyond human, we can't even comprehend it, right? Like jealousy, being a trickster, that's not traits of God. You know, like, oh, I put those there, but don't interact with them or you're going to be damned forever. It's like, I just don't believe in that whatsoever. So I love talking about this stuff.
What I find so interesting about this, and as we talk about this, I'm reminded of that nothing has meaning, 0% of it. Even the things we call sacred, even the things that Native Americans and indigenous cultures called sacred, they allow you access to something. To something. I will say that. And I'm not sure what that is. They allow me access to something. My experience is different than others. It's a very subjective experience, even though there are some similarities and similar characteristics, but it's uniquely specific to you. Now, I look at this as well in a lot of different things. When even if we scale it away from psychedelics and we say what seems disconnected, meaning the UFO phenomena, the paranormal, near-death experiences, anything like that, they tap into a similar resonance of exquisiteness. There's something magic to be had for these altered states of consciousness, because any one of those things is those things. It's a altered state when you're deliberately connecting with plant medicines in this way. It's an altered state whenever you have a connection or contact or an abduction phenomena with something that you perceive to be of other. There are all these fascinating things. And same thing when near-death experiences, when people come back for them shits, they're different. They change, just like us in a psychedelic experience. We come back, if you want to say that, because that's how we phrase it, because you don't feel like you're here. But what's interesting, again, to this, I feel, is that back to the everything is inherently meaningless. This is the beauty of this place. It needs to be. Otherwise, that's the whole foundation for free will, is the fact that shit don't mean nothing until you make it so. And so if you give anything this credit and this power over you in any way, even down to anything that we talk about, you have a certain relationship and there's a certain experience, just like what we said, we're experience whores. We all are, by the way. That's why we're here. And so there's an experience to be had in that. And if you look at anything from psychedelic coaching to psychedelic integration to self-help to people relaying their contact experiences, what it boils down to is this understanding of something extremely amazing is there and you have access to it. And you're, in my view, mapping a part of consciousness that I haven't experienced because I'm mapping it this way. But you and I are speaking now so we can come together and say, oh shit, you saw this? Oh shit, I saw this. And so we can then say, well, there is something magical here. And by the fact of us sharing these experiences, again, in my mind, then this is what enhances the fact that it's so subjective, meaning that it's so personal for you, every experience. And then, that's something I focus on a lot. And this is something psychedelics offered me was, man, it, like Bill Hicks said, it squeegeed my third eye clean, brother. And I just see this place, man, from many lenses in many ways, and a beautiful tapestry and symphony, and it changes constantly. I'm not married to any ideas. I have ideas, not beliefs, because ideas are easier to change. So abandon beliefs altogether. You just clean the slate for needing to cling to anything. And psychedelics gave me this gift of detachment, this gift of non-attachment specifically. And it's because again, when you're in it like that, and as a psychonaut, we're committed to these experiences, and there is, like we talked about already, no off switch. And so you're in it for the ride. And so there's a level of commitment and awareness that you have, this silly, like, you have no apprehension, for your safety and well-being mentally, but really that's like the most expanding thing for you. What is it? The universe rewards the bold. And that's huge. And to something you said earlier as well about psychedelics, I just wanted to touch on, especially, we don't touch the heavy things that much. I feel that things like cannabis are offered for us to interact with in a much more consistent basis, to have more of a personal relationship with, rather than a mentor relationship of you walking on a mountain metaphorically to meet with some guide that clears you out. You know what I mean? Meaning ayahuasca or peyote, and these archetypes are here and they're in this form, and you do greet them. That's the portal to their world. But it's interesting with things like, again, cannabis, whenever we talk about this, because even Terrence McKenna talks about if you do DMT more than once a year, you're a heavy user. And that's from Terrence McKenna. So that's a reverence for the type of experience that has. And what that also tells me is that there's a lot to be afforded in anything you do. And again, meaning is what you give it. But let's say that there's perhaps like a time duration on these things. And I've found cycles within myself. One of my morning practices in my journaling routine is to track the moon. So I know what phase the moon's at, where we are now, how many days to the next phase, and what it looks like. And I've noticed very interesting things with my behavior, my thoughts, things like that on a cyclical basis. Now, other things play into long cycle stuff. Again, the show is called Expanding Reality. We talk about all kinds of stuff. I'm a magnet for incredible people. And so I know a lot of folks who provide services such as astrology, Akashic reading, stuff like that. I want to talk to you about your Akashic reading, because the fact that you say that you have a headache here and then it comes here, it could have been a wound or a death experience from another life, and then that's triggering it somehow, but it's getting your attention that it can be cleared. So I'm actually going to write down that I'm going to connect you with a friend of mine, and we're going to get that done.
Dude, please. If you could solve that for me or give me some ideas for that, oh man, I will kiss you.
I can connect you with the one who can open you up to solve it yourself. And that's the best I can do, right?
Beautiful.
I can show you the door.
Beautiful.
You've got to walk through it. But it is
perfect.
It is this viewpoint, though, that then, leads us to kind of back to what we're talking about, man. It feels like this hall pass, like to that, but it's almost to me like you really figure it out. You find the back door, but it was there for anyone to explore, but also it's not for everyone to explore, because there are prices to be paid if you want. And that price is the old way of viewing things. That's what you sacrifice to move forward. You sacrifice your old self. But really what you learn is that you integrate with new awareness. But at the moment, that's how you feel. And that's why it feels like a death, right? Is because you're literally cleansing that ego. But, with this, again, you can look at these long scale and really apply these models in these moments, these micro examples of the cosmic, of everything. And you're having this little taste of it. And then you come back into this linear time and you're just like, holy shit, like what is, okay. And then you just integrate and you apply, but it makes this place, it enhances your imagination is what I feel. You get really, really connected to who you are, which makes you more authentic, elated, and of service. And so that's the three things I focus on anyhow. And psychedelics have absolutely offered and enhanced all of those.
Dude, 100%. That was beautiful. And the analogy that I used for this that came to me actually, one of the first podcasts I ever went on was this guy, Jeff Lester, awesome friend of mine that does incredible meditation retreats and stuff. And he had this episode called Walk and Talk. And so when I went to my first get together, I talk about this time period in my life. 2020 was, obviously what it was, an amazing fucking opportunity to create space in my life. And when I quit the dispensary, I got into coaching. The first get together I ever went to was Mark England invited me down to his lake house. And so I go there. And Jeff asked me, like, he knew I had the Highly Optimized podcast. I had him on. And he was like, hey, dude, you want to go on a podcast? I was like, sure. So we walked around Mark's neighborhood. And it's in Smith Mountain Lake, beautiful Virginia. It's just awesome, dude. Like, they have one of the funniest signs ever. So, like, I'm not a political guy, but I do think that, like, some of the shit is hilarious, right? And so, like, you go to a red state like that, there's a lot of Trump stuff. And I just think it's fucking hysterical. Like, it's ridiculous, right? That like the two best choices we have were like Trump or this guy, right? So it's just hilarious to me. And so there's a thing where like overall what I found is the whole like Trump thing going on. I just think it's fucking hysterical. Like I think the people that truly believe in him like are just kind of funny to me. And so like there's this sign as you're driving through Virginia, right? You're on like a back road getting close to Mark's house. And there's this huge sign that says burnouts for Trump. And it's just like the fucking road is just littered in fucking skid marks, dude. And I just think it's the funniest shit. So anyway, we're walking around there. I'm in this like hilarious mood. And Jeff's asking me something. And this analogy came to me, and it applies here. It's kind of like, when we come into this life, we are essentially very light, right? We don't have a backpack on. And then throughout life, it's kind of like our mom, right? It's like, hey, you're going out, you're going to need this and you're going to need that, right? And then your dad's like, you're going to need this, you're going to need that. And then society's like, you're going to need this, you're going to need that. Teachers are like, you're going to need this, you're going to need that. Your friends are like, you're going to need this, you're going to need that. So eventually you're just like, why the fuck? You don't even know you have a backpack on, right? But you're like, man, dude, like shit's just not working, right? Like I remember when I was a kid, things were so easy, right? And then what psychedelics do is allow you to realize, wait a minute, I have a fucking backpack on. Is that why I'm so heavy? Yeah. And not only do they allow you to see that, but they allow you to take a look inside. And again, like psychedelics aren't the only thing that can do this, but in the modern day world, they're definitely like a jetpack that can take you to this realization. And then what all so often happens when you do that is you realize like, well, hey, I've been carrying this for so long. There must be really important stuff in there. And so you open it up and you're like, fucking cinder blocks. Who the fuck put these in there, right?
Love mom.
It's like a bunch of useless shit, right? Like, and not useless. Like it served you up to a certain point. Maybe it helped you build muscles and get to the point you're at. But there's a certain point where you're able to go, okay, I now as a sovereign being, I'm going to take these things out and then choose what I put in there. And this is obviously like a very easy way to explain something that's not exactly as easy as I talk about. Maybe it's simple, but not necessarily easy, right? But this is the analogy that always comes to me when I think about these things, because what I notice, and this is with politics, sports, I mean, insert thing in life in 3D reality here, is that like there's this kind of hierarchy, right? You go to the psychedelic communities and they're like, oh, cannabis. And you go to like cannabis and they're like, oh, religion. And you go to religion and they're like, plant medicines, right? And everyone, not everyone, I'm generalizing, but a lot of people are doing this. When in reality, what they don't realize is that they're all leading you to potentially the same sea. It's like all the rivers lead to the same sea. And why the fuck does it matter which river resonates with us the most, right? So long as we're able to successfully tube down this river, this lazy river, and be able to get to that sea, right? And so like for me, it's like I see all this bickering and trying to prove each other right or wrong or all of these things. And that's why for me, I always say, listen, this is what I've chosen to do in my life. Hopefully what you get from this more than anything is inspiration to choose your own way, whether it's psychedelics, sobriety, religion, whatever the fuck it is, so long as it's actually your choice and actually the correct choice for you in your subjective experience. Because like you said, one of my favorite quotes ever is nothing you do matters and it's very important you do it, right? So quantum physics says this too, right? There is no objectivity to life. And this is, I think, why a lot of people get really fucked up and want to try to prove their points, because they're scared of what if my point is wrong and what if theirs is wrong and what if everything really doesn't matter. But in doing so, we realize that we get a blank canvas, and actually that's beautiful, because why would we want to paint on a canvas that already has paint all over it? Like, would we really want to believe what other people believe? Would we really want our lives to look the same way as other people's lives? Like, I think that it's a thirst trap, right? Because if you get to just look at someone else's painting, there's something to look at. And maybe if you have a painting that has nothing on it, it's scary at first because you're like, can I paint? What am I going to put there, right? But once you're able to flip the script on that and realize like, oh my goodness, it's my canvas. I can put anything I want there. It's almost like in Home Alone where he's like, I made my parents disappear.
Yeah.
I made my parents disappear. It's exactly like that,
It is, because you can choose to say good morning, God, or good God morning. Like always, it's diametrically opposed. That's from Blackalicious, Blazing Arrow. The song is First in Flight. Outstanding song. I highly recommend.
Yes.
I love that song. Dude, so much, man. And now, if you'd like, let's get to the perception bit of this, because I absolutely still want to relay my DMT story with you, because you own an object that I saw in it that I'd never seen before until you held it up the other day when we spoke. So,
yes,
one of the most fascinating things about this place, and this is where I'm at with this, honestly, dude, this is where I'm at. I'm going to trip your audience out just a little bit here. No, I'm not. No, I'm not currently on any psychedelics. Okay. I also go ahead and just say this, so I don't batter it to death, that I'm only going to relay my perspective. I'm no expert in anything. I never claim to be. This is just how I see shit. This is how I see shit. So, Perception is everything. There again, back to this quote that I heard in a 1999 Kevin Smith film, Dogma, and it was when Rufus, the character played by Rufus, the character played by Chris Rock, right? He says, "I don't have beliefs, I have ideas, because ideas are easier to change." With that perspective, along with the psychedelic experiences I had, the philosophers of the time that I was listening to, which was Dave Chappelle, his "Killing Him Softly" in DC. I burned more copies of that than the Sublime album. The burning for the kids out there, burning is we used to have CDs and you'd make copies of them and they'd scratch to shit and you'd have to constantly make new ones. Okay.
Yes.
So throughout all of those experiences, I got to this point with perception to where I was like, those philosophers were telling me something. So we had Chappelle, Carlin, Bill Hicks. I mean, these were the guys. Bill Hicks opens my show, every damn show. He's in as many episodes. His voice is in as many episodes as mine is. And so it's this understanding of this, that things are just different. And whenever you look at different than what you're being presented, perhaps. And whenever you get the perhaps, whenever you get the addition of a possibility of things being different than what you're being presented, that's called a choice point. And we come across these things fucking constantly. You're presented with them moment to moment to moment. Even choice points about this. Like, do I like this color? I do. Do I like this color again? No, maybe not so much. Maybe there's a different color, right? So you're constantly greeted with these things. But what perception allows you in time, duration, change, which is why we like laugh about the time's not real. But then, well, then why the fuck is it real to us here? What do we experience it as something here, right? Even though we do experience it subjectively. So with all of these things, I looked at it and I was just like, well, perception has to be the key to this. And so we'll dabble and then we'll blow the mind. Okay. So your reticular activating system, are you familiar with this little bit of your mind, right? Okay. It has 4 functions. The one that I'm most interested in, the sleep's nice. But one I'm most interested in is the one that has to do with your perception. Now, one medical journal details this as a medical definition for this bundle of neurons, your reticular activating system. And what it does is that it filters out useless information as to accent or present or raise up useful information. Now, there are 2 incredibly subjective words in that sentence, and those are medically viable answers when you ask the question, well, what does it do for our perception? They go, oh, yeah, it takes shit that's useless, filters it out, gives you all the useful stuff. It's like, oh, okay, well, what's useful? Oh, well, that's up to you. Well, what's useful to me then? Oh, you determine that. So wait a minute. So there's not a ubiquitous standard for what this bundle of neurons does in everyone's mind. People see different shit. Play with this. You will go, oh, well, I'm a blue Tesla. Let's say I'd like to, look at a blue Tesla. You will see them fucking everywhere. And it will get unbelievably so. You'll just see so many goddamn blue Teslas. You're like, where the fuck did all these things come from? Now, the question is, were they out there all the time, but they were considered useless to you, so your mind filtered it out? Or did you create them by making them useful, and therefore they were more abundant in your experience? Scale that the fuck up. And this trips you out. Everyone is in their own reality. This blows out, again, the idea of consensus reality to me to a degree. Now, I feel that there's interactions. I feel that there is a consensus nature, a co-collective creative nature to this place. But at its core, we are on a vibrational plane all of our own. We ring a guitar string. Every damn soul here rings a guitar string that's absolutely in pitch all of its own. This would explain why UFOs, they can just find you because they're beamed into your signal, right? It can explain a lot of things, perhaps, if you want to follow it like this. But this place gets even trippier because if you think about this, then all that one needs to do to create an environment in which you feel you're in, let's say a simulation, right, or a reality or anything like that, is not, the simulation argument. One thing that people talk about, and I absolutely love these types of conversations. So whenever you talk about the simulation thing, you speak about rendering an environment, right? And so let's say, for example, the model we have from our perspective, and so what we therefore anthropomorphize is the video games, right? And we say, okay, well, coders know that you don't have to render things that are behind the character when he's not looking, or even parts of the reality that they're not in. So then you would say, okay, well, it's a localized experience. It's a local reality. And so this place only needs to render what you feel is appropriate. Now, couple this with the multiverse theory, meaning that it's an infinite version of these simulations, if you will, that all have a program running in them that you are a vibrational match to, let's say, and that you're you're transporting your consciousness between them constantly with every decision that you make. This is why people come and go in your reality. This is why folks fall off. This is why your tastes change. You jump to a reality where your taste wasn't that. So rather than you progressing in linear time, how I see that, one of the ways in which I see this, which is just fun, is that every decision blink of my eyes, I'm refreshing my consciousness into a reality in which I'm a vibrational alignment. Every time I blink my eyes, I'm in a new reality. When you go with this, then you start talking about things like what Abraham Hicks says about the moment of now, and that you're only in the moment of now. And I'm a big proponent of this. We have a memory reference, I feel, and this is one thing that you think about when you think about this. You're like, well, what's memory for? I feel it's context for you to create your reality. So if you want to say this again, that to the model of the simulation, rendering an entire environment is one way to do it. And then they talk about, well, that's crazy because you would need a computer the size of the sun and you would need all these things to power something like that, again, from our perspective. I started thinking about this and I thought back to the conversations about the UFO phenomena when I first started hearing about this like 20 years ago in my experience. And all of them said, they have these things and they do these craft and they do all this stuff, but it's crazy and they can't be doing what they're doing because we wouldn't do that. Like we wouldn't build something and then send it that far because that's ridiculous, right? And so the answer in my mind has always been, they would always go, well, why would they do that? Why would they do that? And the answer is because it's not hard for them. Like you're limited by your perspective of what's possible, which again, is what perception offers you, the expansion of what is possible. The not either or, the either or and, the yes and. It's like what else is going? It only expands. I've really found this. There's never one answer. There's never one perspective. There's many, many times, and often way more so, multiple perspectives that are absolutely 100% correct at the exact same point in time that absolutely contradict each other in a sense. So again, when you start looking at the interconnectivity of this, your reticular activating system, you even go down to the placebo effect, which we won't spend time on, but that's fucking magic right there. That's another point. And then the double slit experiment as well. If you're not looking at it, it doesn't occur. If a tree falls in the woods, does it make a noise? No, because you're not there to render that, right? Now, if we think about it from, again, a simulation perspective, that we've scaled our thoughts about the UFOs to perhaps it's not that hard for them, then we say as a simulation, again, maybe it's not that hard for them to create that, or the mechanism in which it operates perhaps is different, right? Maybe we can be a little bit more imaginative. So to this point, I would say, and what trips me the fuck out is like, have you ever seen the Vitruvian Man? The arms that go out?
Yes.
Okay. What if that's your reality? That's your spatial reality if you have a body at all, and you're not just a brain in a vat somewhere with electrodes hooked to you, because all of your reality is simulated through the electronics pumping through your brain in a certain entourage effect. And this could also be done in a simulation. So then you would say, okay, well, it wouldn't be hard to create a simulation if your entire focus was simply the apprehension of the perspective of the occupant. Now, then you could simulate wind, you could simulate vastness, you could simulate that you're standing on the edge of a Grand Canyon. You could do all of this stuff because you've simply apprehended the perspective. So with this game, this matrix, this huge thing going on, these ego structures, that's what I feel is going on here. They're employees of a system that is created for you to have options of experience and shift in the multiverse of whatever the fuck you want and play. And there's a myriad of ways in which we can do this, but it's your perception that is your compass. That's your guide. And if you feel that you're relegated to a certain experience, you're absolutely correct, and you will stay in that version of the multiverse. But should you choose to hop out of it for a little while, it's pretty fun, and you can go play.
Dude, I mean, first of all, I fucking love that theory. Guys, when I met Brandon, I'm like, this guy's my spirit animal. And now you guys know why, because we think the exact same way. And, it's like that quote from Henry Ford. And of course, this is a very muggle way of saying it. But whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. And what is that saying? Is that there's no objectivity to whether you can do something or whether you cannot. It's really just how you perceive what you can do or what you cannot do. And I think this is why it's so important to have whatever types of experiences will lead you to this type of conclusion, because the people that understand this, that don't want you to understand this, if you do not create your own reality and choose what perspective you want to live from, they will do it for you. And guess what? They do not have your best interest at heart, right? Like, you look around at the idea of original sin. You look around at the idea of, even this kind of program, right? Like, hey, if you're a man, you got to produce, you got to work, right? You got to cut to the top, lone wolf, all of this stuff, right? Like, and so many people are like, okay, that's what I'm going to do, right? And they never even question it, right? And I've noticed a big trend too. And again, this is all just theory and again, perspective, right? There is no right or wrong here. But what I've seen in my own reality is the idea that why are we being incentivized that busyness is such a good thing, right? You hang out with people and you're like, how you been? Like, oh, I'm so busy, right? I'm just so busy, And again, like at the end of the day, I have been stuck in this too, right? And so this is a big thing that's been connecting to me over the last 3 years, and noticing where in my life still, I think it's fucking awesome to be busy all the time. But yet at the same time, how many more fruits I'm able to reap when I'm actually able to have space in my life. But yet how hard space is to get in my life. And so what I see is a collection, or one, or maybe a collection of belief systems that are running, that I'm now becoming aware of, that are not leading me to joy, love, gratitude, and these higher states of consciousness. And so there's two ways to think about this type of perception. Either, oh my God, this sucks. I'll never get out of this. I wish I could, but I coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? Or, right, which is more of the simulation that's been given to us, as I see it anyway, by, I'm going to use the term, the powers that be, right?
Wizard
Whatever
bird.
the fuck, and whoever the fuck they are, right? Or you can say, oh my goodness, if these things are in me and I now realize this, I can fix all of this. And that's why it's such a dichotomy happening in the world right now between people like you and I, probably plenty of people listening to this show, that are starting to tap into these things. And by no means saying we're ascended masters or, because again, that's not nearly as common as Instagram will want you to believe.
Yeah, no shit.
But seeing like, no, actually, these are all the ways in which we were blocking ourselves. Holy shit, that's hilarious. So there's a different perspective on it of like, oh, actually, it's almost like this, right? If you are not a mechanic and your car starts making a sound, you might end up thinking, most cases you will end up thinking, fuck, like this is going to be so much fucking money, blah, blah, blah. A mechanic would look at that situation totally differently. Even if it was something expensive, they'd be like, well, dude, I'll just rip the tranny out in the driveway and redo it. Like, no big deal, right? Because they have a different perspective over what is like a mountain or a molehill.
Over what's possible.
Exactly what's possible, right? From that situation. And so again, like when we think about really what we're talking about here, it's like being able to be the observer, right? Which is a term, like these terms are thrown around so much. And I think they're thrown around by people who truly get them. But again, it's like if you don't have eyes to see, you won't be able to truly see or hear them, right? And this is why, again, I might have mentioned this on your show, but it's like people read the Bible in a very literal sense, yes. Right? So they're like, if two men lay next together, they should be stoned. They're like, oh, I guess we kill gay people. It's like, dude, what? Like, how did you get that?
No, it was saying if you sleep with your buddy, you must be super high and you just fell asleep. Yeah. That's what it meant. I'm
exactly,
reading it literally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
About that literal interpretation. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, it's important to realize that when these things were written, we were in a different level of consciousness as a collective. There were much more people who were aware of this type of thing, right? At least that's what, I personally believe based on all the evidence that I've found in my own subjective experience of reality, right? And so now we're in this very literal sense where we don't know what we don't know. We're not aware of how boxed in we are. And certain ones of us are starting to break free of it and we're being called crazy. The same way that I live really close to Salem, right? What was the Salem witch trial? If you really look into it, it's a bunch of people eating moldy bread with ergot fungus. And you're like, oh, this fucking witch is here, right? Yes. Because people back then were practicing anything different from the norm, right? So anything different from the norm was scary because what was really going on, people that were calling these people witches were starting to realize how boxed in they were, but their ego wouldn't allow them to see it. So therefore, this person was crazy. They weren't actually enlightened. They were crazy. And who knows if they were really enlightened, but they were doing their own thing and they were fine with it, right? Let's just call it that. But instead of seeing it that way, they were putting it through, this person is challenging my view of reality, which I am deeming to be correct objectively, and therefore they must die. And so you expand that into now, and you look at all these different things. My sport seems better than yours because of this. My car is better than yours because of this. And again, I'm not saying that anyone needs to go out and change how they live their life, but I am a curious observer watching this and going, do I want that for me?
Right.
Fuck no. I'm discerning that's not what's leading me to desirable outcomes in my life. And I think that's the ultimate point, right? Like, it's not about proving people wrong or saying your version of reality is wrong. It's just about being able to see this for what it is and go, what do I choose? Right? What do I choose to paint on my blank canvas?
100%, dude. And I'm not, again, I've led to the point where probably none of this is real, and I'm okay with that. Yeah. Like, it's fine. You go through your mind fucks with it every now and then. You're like, oh, yeah. Okay, it's all right. All right. And I've experienced this so much, man. And it's in a simple way, because this is your ride. And like you said earlier, it's options of experience. That's what I feel like these Klaus Anal Schwabs and all this Great Reset and all this shit is. It's not an inevitability. It's an option for experience, and it should suck. I feel like, and I wanted to ask you about psychedelics as an entity. Have you thought about that? Like psilocybin specifically?
For sure.
Okay.
For sure I have. And I'll wait until you're done. Yeah. But I have an interesting idea on this.
Yeah. And so same thing with the witch trials. What if, this has been attempting to get the whatever species has been here at whatever point in time. We hear about this, monkeys that were running across the savannah, picking up stuff and the food of the gods, of course, Terence McKenna's. And you have the stoned ape theory kind of a thing, and that expanded consciousness, and that seemed to go pretty well. Then maybe ergot, that energy grew in that area and said, hey, let's give these folks a try. And then they killed everybody. And they're like, oh, shit. All right, we should rethink introducing ourselves in this way. So it seems to me that as an entity is just as cautious about interacting with us as we are with it, or should be, right? But now it seems like, again, that because that relationship has been formed over enough of us, over enough times, it, in my mind, sort of feels like the wolf. You know how the wolf became the domesticated dog? And so it was this time period of they figured out a symbiotic relationship. And again, this thing was probably always there for us. But again, it's maybe timid with us as well. We, like, you take the perspective of cannabis as the female plant all the time. And I really revere this because, again, it is a reverence. It is something that we can appreciate and identify with and connect with rather than just some fucking thing. And so in this way, with it being connectivity like this, then I feel that psychedelics in the same way offer us a massive gift, a collaboration process with the other side. And it expands this level by bringing us up in awareness. That's all it can offer us. It can only show you the door. You're the one that's got to walk through it, like anything, because there is a sovereignty rule here. And to anybody that worry about anyone's going to strap them down and do anything to, like, stick something in their arm, it's not a thing. It's not how this place works. It's a sovereignty place, I feel. And so with this, then you imbibe in this, but you must invite it. We have so many examples of this. The vampire, right? You've got to invite it in. You've got to be a willing participant. Same thing with the contact phenomena. If you tell an alien, hey, I'm not cool with this, they'll go, okay, sit down. We'll drop you off on the way back. I've heard of people saying this. So again, it's a sovereignty idea. This also idea of this entity that brings us in and gives us the gift of new awareness. So with this insight, we're able to converse more and bring ourselves up, because again, it sort of whispers to us from the other side as an entity, and it's in you, which is fascinating. So yeah, maybe it connects with us every now and then, and it goes shit house on a whole area. And maybe that was also part of the cleansing. Maybe it's highly intelligent. And no, I am giving it too few of credit, which I'm not doing intentionally. I'm weighing the options as possibilities, but all of it's considered, man. And it's just an interesting relationship that we've had with it. Just, again, sort of like any bit of nature. There are folks out there that just want to rape the natural world, and there are folks out there that really want to connect with it and know that it's a gift here for us. And psychedelics are no different.
100%, man. You know, like, I absolutely agree with that. And I think that psychedelics as an entity are just as curious as we are, right?
Yeah.
And maybe they have what's called a higher level of consciousness, if that's even truly objectively a thing, right? Like, who knows what's a higher level of consciousness versus a lower level of consciousness, right? We can say densities, we can say dimensions, we can say emotions, we can say these things. But again, those are all just constructs also, right? And so at the end of the day, it always comes back to, like, you know, I'm almost like, you know, those, what was that, an Etch-a-Sketch? Was that what it was? The thing that you draw, but eventually you just shake it and it goes back to what it always was, which is just a blank canvas, right? And, you know, I've had the idea for a while that if we have free will, if psychedelics are an entity, and obviously, like, if people were able to connect with a psychedelic and go back and share, and people would just immediately believe it, I think psychedelics would step in the way of free will. And so if free will is a thing, which I do believe it is, and also psychedelics might be looking to interact with us, and maybe they are a higher level of whatever, consciousness, whatever, and they're looking to help us in some way, shape, or form, let's go on this theory, then why wouldn't they introduce themselves in an intoxicant? Because the last thing you're going to believe from someone that just ate a bunch of mushrooms is that they saw God and it's in this mushroom and all these things. They're going to be like, yeah, sure. But if they have a certain key, right? Maybe they've meditated a lot. Maybe they're just really in a state of joy, whatever. They might go, ooh, I feel something in that. Let me go try these mushrooms and see what's going on. So it's almost like a fail-safe in a way, right? Because the people that aren't ready to hear it are going to bastardize it, just say no to drugs, these kind of things, right? And so I've thought of that theory before of, like, well, yeah, it actually is kind of like the perfect medium, because typically, and it's even happening today, right? If I say that cannabis helps me connect to my heart, people are going to roll their eyes. Certain people are like, oh, sure, dude, go smoke another one, right? Because they're not the people that are ready to hear what I want to say. And maybe it isn't the medicine for them, like, straight up, right? It's not that I'm right and they don't understand something. It's like, literally, it's just a mix match, right? Or a mismatch. And so at the end of the day, there might be someone that goes, well, hey, tell me more about that, right? And that's the person that, like, we could actually share that to and have a positive energetic loop with. And I know one of the challenges I went through for a while is trying to share what I felt was valuable to people that weren't willing to receive it and weren't ready to receive it, or even just, it wasn't their flavor of ice cream, right? And for a long time, what I realized was that to the degree that I felt I had to share something with everyone was the degree to which I didn't fully know or believe or have an idea that like I could really believe that for myself and not need external validation to believe it was true. Right.
Yeah.
And so like the more that I've been able to say, listen, guys, cannabis helps me. I don't give a fuck if you agree with me. I don't care if it helps you, whatever. I'm glad that it helps me. And hey, if you're someone who resonates with this, cool, let's talk about it. If not, cool, you can think I'm a dirty stoner or whatever. I don't fucking care. Right. Because at the end of the day, I think that what we've learned from any person who's truly made history is that they didn't give a fuck if they made everyone happy. Yeah. Right. And at the end of it, they didn't care if anyone agreed with them. And the best philosophers understood this and they weren't trying to prove each other wrong. They were like, well, this is what I believe love to be.
Yes,
cool. And this is what I believe it to be. Oh, cool. And then they'd high five probably, I don't know for sure, and go walk into the sunset together. Right. Like, absolutely. I think that's, for me, if we're going to talk about like higher level consciousness, that's what it would equate to for me. People being able to hold differing subjective views of the universe and still be able to smile at each other and go, dude, I fucking love that you believe that because it clearly makes you happy. And that's fucking awesome. And so long as you're abiding by trust law, God's law, which is don't hurt anyone, don't steal, don't be a dickhead, basically. Why can't we believe whatever allows us to come closer to joy, love, and gratitude personally?
Clarity over agreement. You've nailed it with this. This is what it's all about. This is what our eyes, I feel, are really being opened to. And as well, back to like the sort of narrative, if we want to phrase it like that, it's so silly. Like it's been ridiculous for me for a while, but now it's just so laughably silly, that green screen stuff. And we're not even just strictly talking about politics, just NASA. Like what the fuck is going on with this? Like this is why I've had such amazing conversations about flat Earth. I don't know. I don't know what the fuck's going on. I'm not, again, outside of that, it's just a bubble and that your reality ends right here, like where your fingertips are, like, or that you have hands at all. Like I'm fine with this place being that. But again, it's whenever you're displaying things like that out in the open as fact, and there's so many holes that are blatantly obvious to some people. I, like you, man, there's many reading levels. I kind of view this place, whatever this is, this environment as a school, like grade, kindergarten through 12 or whatever, American school. And there are a lot of people, dude, in kindergarten. All the grade levels are here together. All of us interact. They have driver's licenses. They're older than you, but they're at a kindergarten reading level. And there are just awarenesses that come with excelling in grade levels, right? And again, not hierarchical. Anyone has the choice to do this as well. If you want to bring reincarnation into the mix or anything like this, then you're saying, well, perhaps they're new souls, if this idea, right? There's a quote by Leonardo da Vinci that I really loved. I think that really sums it up well, because I see this place as consistently a tool for learning. And you get this again with our glimpse that time is not a thing, but our experience of it here. So then you're saying, well, what's that about? Well, time provides you change over duration, right? And so that's sort of what we're really, in my mind, here to kind of play with in this idea. But when things in the realm sit here and say, hey, this is what's going on, it, in my mind, says that's not what's going on, right? But again, somebody at another reading level is going to go, yep, that's it. That's exactly what's happening. My granddaddy, he worked on the Saturn V rocket. I got a bolt right over here. Well, NASA contracted that out to well over 100,000 different contractors, all with employees, all with families, all sending stuff home for this psychological thing. When I get to these points of this stuff, I'm just like, yes, that's going on. Yes, okay, I can see that. Yeah, all right. What's it for? And I just kept asking that question, like, what am I in relationship to this? Because when I woke up, if you want to call it that, at 18, along with that bundle of psychedelics, big move, a lot of dissonance and physical abuse in the home, yet a lot of other things going on, I found conspiracies as well as spirituality all within a 1.5 year time period. And so all of this really entered my psyche. And it was something that the conspiracies especially, I was sitting there going, well, why is it so stupid? Like, what is it all about? And I was pissed, and I'm, Paul Revering everywhere, trying to wake people up and all that stuff. Man, it's when I switched, and it was a few years ago. There's an awesome show called Macroaggressions by a guy named Charlie Robinson, and he calls himself a conspiracy analyst. And I love this. It detaches you from the emotionality of the outcome. Plus, I didn't identify as someone responsible for anyone's karma anymore, right? I'd freed myself from that. I didn't feel responsible for waking people up. I will absolutely erect this lighthouse and do my best to shine the light, keep the windows clear for you so you can see it as bright and far as possible. But I'm not here to save anyone. Number one, you didn't need to be saved. That's a part of the program, right? Number two, no one's fucking coming to save you. And so again, when we sort of scale this back with all of these concepts, you're sitting here just going like, okay, well, why did things in the air quotes matrix present themselves as so silly? Why is school so hard? Why are religion's so dense? Why do they limit you so much? And the answer in my mind is to break out of it. Now, to the Da Vinci quote, there are three classes of people here: those who see, those who can see when shown, and those who don't see. So this idea in my mind, again, is sort of a model setup. This is an observation from a dude a long time ago, and I think that we could still say that it applies today. So whenever you look at this thing, you're saying, okay, well, there's a consistent pattern to society. There's a consistent pattern to the beings that walk here that they call themselves conscious, that get this speed dating time with Gaia for a little while. And within that consistency, there is a level of folk that don't see. They can't see. It's part of their job to stay down there and just go, yep, everything NASA says is true, everything the government says is true, absolutely. Because they're a point of reference for those who choose to see, or who can see, that choose to show people who can be shown. So it's this middle swath that's this like battleground, as some people call it. I also don't see this, because again, back to pat my hand, I don't see a bad guy here.
Yep.
This takes a level of emotional maturity we'll probably get into on the next one, because this is going to run long, but just to plant the seed, to see them as motivators rather than enemies, right? As allies of expansion rather than as evil that's out there that's going to get me. There's a difference when you interface with energies like that in this way that is the alchemist. This is where you really start to alchemize the energy here.
Absolutely, dude. Like, let's say that someone is a conspiracy theorist, right? And this person believes the government's out to get them. And they believe that they are embodying a frequency of love, but they're saying, fuck the government. Well, what are they doing? They're saying, I'm coming from a place of love, but I don't like those people. AKA, I'm not coming from a place of love with those people. That is a complete paradox, right? You can't come from love and have this higher level of consciousness and also make someone the bad guy, because it's almost like if you watch a movie, who is the person that allows the hero to rise to the occasion? It's not if a movie started out and everything was perfect, right? The guy got the girl right away. They had a baby. The baby came out fine. Parents were always like supporting them. Do whatever you want. We love you no matter what. What fucking movie would there be, right? There's that person who plays the villain that allows that other person to rise to the occasion. And this is what I really thought the inner critic voice is. And everyone's like, oh, that fucking voice. Fuck this voice. Fuck that, right? But also, like, who is really more on your side than the person who's willing to be rough with you and make you choose what you believe, right? So, like, for instance, if you believe that you are love and that voice goes, no, you're not. Are you going to go, fuck, no, I'm not? Or are you going to go, yeah, I am. Watch me, right? And so at the end of the day, that person, that part of you, is actually the one that's calling you forward and saying, hey, I'm going to tell you these things. What do you choose to believe as a sovereign being, right? And so I think this is, dude, we're going to have to do probably 2 more parts. Absolutely. Because I could literally have a 3-hour long conversation with. Next time we'll plan a 2-hour one, dude. But, Brandon, I want to make sure I give people a place to find you, because they're going to be fucking so stoked to check out Expanding Reality, all the things you're doing. Where can people find you, man?
Yeah, so expandingrealitypodcast.com. And I just got to say, brother, thank you so much for just letting me be myself. Dude. You're just outstanding. Remarkable. Bro, what you do. You're just a goddamn light in this place. And I just want to thank you for what you do. I know your audience is grateful as well. So expandingrealitypodcast.com. We can be found at all the places, the YouTube, the 40-something different podcast platforms. Something I do want to point out real quick is we did found a publishing house called Ridiginal Publishing. It means ridiculously original, for ridiculously original authors. And this is my first book. And what it is it's a companion book for the show. Now, what this is it's sort of a fill-em-ins, right? This is something that you do in conjunction with the show, and this sort of shows you how to use it. And all of this stuff is also to really encourage other content creators like yourself to help add value for themselves as well. So we work with a lot of authors. We're very empowering. We've got illustrators, writers, book cover designers, all sorts of things. So if you guys are interested in empowering yourselves by empowering your audience, if you're a coach, if you've got an idea for a book, children's books, we do fiction, nonfiction, what they call low content books, which is what this is. So for instance, this you could fill out with the show, and every 3 episodes, there's sort of a little prompt. Some about psychedelics, some are what are some of your favorite mysteries to explore. There's some stuff about like what would you ask an alien. Basically, it's just a fun way to interact with the show, but also it's an invitation for other folks to also contact Ridiginal, and you can do that through just expandingrealitypodcast.com for now. Website under construction, but a lot of ideas, a lot of wonderful people to connect y'all with. So if that's something that sounds interesting, please reach out. And that book is available on the website.
Dude, for any of you that aren't watching the video to this, you got to check that book out. That was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Thanks,
Dude.
man.
That is the coolest thing. Like the artwork in there, just the vibe of it, man. Like immediately I'm like, that is exactly my flavor of ice cream right there.
Yeah,
100%.
Fun. And I did this all in Canva, by the way. Highly recommend everybody get Canva. Just go get fucking Canva. And then also I did the website to reflect it as well. So the website has the same thing. But yeah, I love it. And that's just volume 1. So there are many more coming. Yeah, thanks,
rad,
man.
Dude, 100%. Guys, isn't Brandon the absolute man? Like I said in the intro, when I first met him, I was absolutely shocked at how well we charged each other's batteries and how many aspects of our lives lined up. And my hope for each of you who tune into this episode is that you leave with your battery charged to an 11 and your curiosity sparked and ready to be ignited. For anyone looking to get in touch with Brandon, dive into his absolutely stellar podcast, the Expanding Reality Podcast, which I have been a guest on. Purchase his books and keep up to date on all of the amazing things he is creating in the world. Take a deep dive into the show notes for this episode, where I will be laying out all of the easiest ways to take action on those quests today. Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time to hop on the show with me and riff today, for sparking curiosity in the world at large through the incredible work you do, and for being such a battery charger and source of inspiration in my life. And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.